we're trapped with this inflation. Inflation is a terrible thing. It's what brings down hegemonies. And you look at things simplistically. I look at it just very simplistically. That's where, if you can do that and sort of understand the markets that way, you should be successful over a long period of time. And right now, there are real problems because inflation is a terrible thing. And once you have it, it's almost like being drug dependent. And it's very hard to get rid of it once it starts. I mean, I remember the 70s, but it takes down countries, it takes down hegemonies, and I think Powell is very right to do anything he can to stop this inflation that's coming on. And the real surprising thing is that you haven't had it before, because for the last years, we've been just printing up money and just giving it out. And one of the major problems is, I think, and nobody's blamed them, but it's corporate America. It's the CEOs, rubber stamp boards. The money has been very cheap, so they've been able to borrow money very cheaply. But instead of putting it back into production, they've taken that money, borrowed more and more, and bought stocks at very high valuations. And now it's time to pay the price of that. So you'll have more and more debt coming due or interest rates to pay at higher prices. And that is a problem as far as earnings are concerned. And aside from that, household net worth, I would say median household net worth is really non-existent in this country. So half the households have no net worth. And the other half, except for the very top 10%, I think are very concerned about what's happening. And they're looking at their net worth, which is the market and their homes. And you have to be very concerned about that. Well, we're very hedged. And as far as I'm concerned, short the S&P and short different companies. And what I look for are companies that have some hidden jewel. And that served our purposes. We find a company with hidden jewels that are either not well managed or the boards are rubber stamping too much debt or whatever. And we get it on those boards. And eventually, sometimes you have to replace the CEO. And a lot of these companies are doing well. So you take CVI, our refinery. Our refinery, I mean, it took years, but it's now actually functioning greatly because we have spent quite a bit of capital in it over the years. We had to save it from going bankrupt. The government, in their great wisdom, with ESG, made refineries very difficult to make a profit. So a large number of small refineries went out of business. And I won't go into details, but they penalize refineries and they tell them they don't want them. So unlike almost in any other industry where if you're doing well, you build more. If you're doing well in the widget business, you build more widget factories. You can't build another refinery. You take CVI, for instance. The refineries we have to replace would be, $10-12 billion, I believe. You can't put a number on it because you really can't build another one in this country. So you can't have that competitive element coming in. A lot of refineries went out of business. A lot of the large refineries, or the big companies, listened to the government telling you how terrible refineries were and stopped building them up. So today, what they call the crack spread has widened tremendously. The diesel crack, for instance, has gone up as high as $75 or $80, and that just means it used to be, $20, $25. So obviously, our EBITDA has, for 3 quarters, has gone up to $800 million, I believe, or close to $1 billion. But then you can't really come in and say, well, these refineries, should pay more taxes or something, because in the bad times, I must have put $300-400 million in to save that refinery or that two refineries when a lot of refineries went out of business. So now you're backed into an energy problem for gasoline and diesel. And diesel is very important today. Diesel now is used in Europe to generate electricity, which will stop eventually. And from the point of view of ESG, you have something called bunker fuel that is really, really polluting the water as we speak. So diesel is used to replace that terrible fuel they used. And then our refinery, Wynnewood and Coffeyville, the two refineries, we're able to produce fertilizer or help to produce fertilizer. So we don't need, with fertilizer, you need ammonia. You need gas to make the ammonia, NH3. You need natural gas, except we're the only one in the country, and people don't understand this, that built this many years ago. We had the foresight to build it. I can't take credit for it, but it's there. And we were able to make it with something called petcoke. And so we don't need the natural gas to make the fertilizer. And we ended up owning a fertilizer plant, which is, the factory is right next to our refinery. And it's really fascinating. And nobody even wanted that 7, 8 years ago, but we nourished it and we kept it going. We own 36% of it, and we own the control of it. And obviously today, fertilizer is the most necessary thing in the world if you think about it, especially if the Ukraine keeps going and they shut off these things. And we are the only one in the country that can make it without natural gas. So, I mean, we have all these little jewels at CVI. I'm just using one example of what we look for, and they're coming to fruition.
Yeah, and also, speaking of finding those gems, you just made a play. You bought a big stake of Crown Holdings. You just bought a big stake of aluminum can company today. Tell me really quick summary, what made you do that move?
Well, there too, you look for a couple of hidden jewels. I mean, it's in an industry that has natural growth, because it's in an industry where you're slowly but surely getting rid of plastic containers. So because of the environment again. And for some reason, the earnings of this company have not come to fruition. Their earnings are down. Well, a lot of companies' earnings are down, but I think one of the problems that corporations do, and there are many good CEOs, there are many good boards, but a lot of the problems are that they try to diversify, or they try to say, I'm going to take over a company because I got this company, and you're going to get synergies. And synergies are very hard to get. If you look back in history, Jack Welch was good enough to get synergies at GE, but then look what happened. So they went out and bought different companies. We think they should just get rid of it and stick to the can business. I think there's a lot of things that you can do in that company. They're not badly run.